Okay, welcome everyone to this third event of the ITSS webinar series. Today we will talk about the cybersecurity challenges that Italy faces, in particular about the development of the new Agency of Cybersecurity. And for this special occasion, we have a really special guest, Mr. Andrea Rigoni. So welcome, Andrea, and thank you for being here. Mr. Rigoni has more than 25-year experience in the internet and information security sector. He has been working with governments as well as international insecurity, such as the UN and NATO. He is also the co-founder of Intellium. He is now the partner for Deloitte Risk Advisory. He's also been the director of the Global Cybersecurity Center in Rome. So thank you for bringing your expertise here with us today. It's a real pleasure to introduce you and welcome.
Good evening, and thank you very much for having me here.
Of course. So now I will give the floor to our two amazing speakers, Sarah Toubman and Maria Chiara Aquilino. And while I will share their presentation, let me briefly introduce them. Sarah is a graduate student from King's College. She holds a master's degree in war studies, and she has done various research on the intersection in connection between regional identity and security, while Maria Chiara is a master's student at Leiden University on security management, and she is also there at Leiden University, a research assistant. And we also have with us Julia Hodgins. Thank you for being here, Julia. Julia is from the cybersecurity team, and I'm sure she will love to jump in later during our more interactive part. For now, I will turn this over to Sarah. And so please, Sarah, the floor is yours. I hope you can see the presentation. Let me just. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ludovica. Yeah, so just if we could go to the first slide, that would be great. Okay, perfect. That's great. So yeah, I just wanted to start off by speaking about some of the history of cybersecurity in Italy and how that's influenced the current creation of the new cybersecurity agency. So for a brief timeline introduction, in 1993, we saw the Italian government's first measures to really address cybersecurity in the law, with the criminal code and code of criminal procedure being amended to consider cyber and computer crimes. In 1996, the Italian Data Protection Authority was created and further laws on cyber resilience were passed. Then in 1998, there was the creation of an anti-cybercrime police force. In 2003, there was what's called a CERT, a computer emergency response team. A network of these teams were created, and public and private entities were both basically involved to protect the critical cyber infrastructures. And so then in 2005, laws to address cyber and data security obligations by public administrations were passed, and the National Strategic Center for Cyber Threats at the Minister of the Interior was established. In 2007, we saw really a pretty comprehensive reform of the national intelligence apparatus and the establishment of the information system for the security of the Republic. And a few more recent developments. In 2008, the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime was passed in Italy. In 2012, the establishment of the Italian Digital Agency and the government adoption of several national cybersecurity plans. Oh, if we can just go back. Yes, thanks. Then I'll talk about some of these in a little more detail. But in 2017, the strategic guidelines for the national cyberspace protection and ICT security, that's information and communications technology security, was created by a special cybersecurity decree of the President of the Council of Ministers as part of the National Plan for Cyberspace Protection and ICT Security. And then 2019, some essentially urgent provisions were passed to create a cybernetic national security perimeter for all public administrations, national and private entities associated with public services. So basically, a lot of these teams and organizations that had previously been created detected that there was a lack of security between public administrations and private entities that were working with them. And then, as we're going to discuss in further detail, in 2021, the new Agency for National Cybersecurity was created. So just briefly, a few of the strategic guidelines that the plans in 2013, 2017 were really trying to address some of the specific issues. So the strengthening of critical infrastructures and associated strategic players' defense capabilities, the improving of cyber actors' technological, operational, and analytical capabilities, the encouraging of public-private cooperation, as I previously mentioned, this is quite important, fostering cybersecurity culture, sort of allowing for the growth of in fostering of education around cybersecurity in Italy, not only for the general public, but helping young people become cybersecurity professionals, supporting international cooperation on cybersecurity, collaborating with other nations and Europe, and reinforcing counteraction capabilities against online criminal activities. Yeah, and then in the 2017 plan, really a lot of the same points. It's an updated plan, but based on the previous one. So just a bit more specific details, as you can see here. And then we can go to the next one. Yeah, so, and then these are some of the core tasks highlighted in the 2017 plan to actually implement those goals that were highlighted in the 2013-2017 plan. So reviewing the responsibilities of the National Cybersecurity Management Board, simplifying the decision-making procedure for cyber crises and their management, and reducing complexity within the national cybersecurity framework through mergers and the unification of the computer emergency response teams. Yeah, then sort of creating a few other centers and organizations to help manage the cybersecurity. So you're seeing not only the expansion of cybersecurity in Italy highlighted as a goal, but also the simplification, because really prior to the creation of the cybersecurity agency, as you saw in a lot of the laws, things were sort of piecemeal and different responsibilities were designated to different organizations. Yeah, so just a few graphs showing how sort of the responsibilities were spread out in cybersecurity prior to the 2021 agency creation. Yeah. So I'll pass it off to Chiara.
we could move to the next slide, please.
The next one. Yeah. It's not really responding, my computer.
While you move to the next slide, I want just to tell you a little anecdote. So when there was the slide with the details on the action plan, you might have seen that the actions were not 10, a round number, but 11. And so the anecdote is that, that document was developed by the Office of the Prime Minister in 2013. And I was the advisor in the Prime Minister office on cybersecurity. So there was already a draft when I joined. There was May 2013, and we were working on both the strategy and the action plan. And there were already 10 points in the draft. And I said, where's risk management? I mean, how can a strategy, a national strategy, be disconnected from the concept of risk management? We need to add risk management, and it should be the main pillar of the action plan. And so I made the proposal, let's add it and let's put it in the first position. I made some other changes. The final result was that they only took my suggestion to have risk management, and they didn't want to touch the 10 points. That came from another agency, another office. It's better we don't remove it. So they came up with 11th, and they forgot to put it in the first place. So when you read the text, it is written to be as the introduction rather than the end. So that's the reason why now you have 11 points in the action plan. It's my fault.
Thank you. That's very interesting and insightful.
And you can't believe how many times we need to have this discussion with governments, not just the Italian government. And it's a recurring topic. We will go back to that as, it needs to be based on risk management. It's a continuous balance, and they forget. They think that cyber is just a list of prescriptions. You have to follow them, and then it's done. What a big mistake!
Thank you, Andrea. So, yeah, Chiara, do you want to?
Yes, thank you so much for this insight, Mr. Rigoni, and yeah, I would be glad to kind of bring it to these days and talk about the COVID-19 impact on the cybersecurity solution market. So, of course, COVID had an impact on the cybersecurity solution market, and indeed, investments growth in the sector slowed down due to the pandemic. There has been a 4% of growth. But yet this was limited in comparison with more developed countries. And the precarious circumstances that were generated by the crisis of COVID-19 also led businesses to cut down their budgets for cybersecurity. And this meant that the number of companies investing in cybersecurity decreased in comparison to 2019. Yet the rate was still quite high, given that 40% of businesses were making investments, but they still reduced in comparison to previous years. And additionally, due to remote working and reliance, therefore, on remote working and the rise in the use of tech devices and collaboration networks, cyber threats have increased. And indeed, there has been a reported spike in cyber attacks to big corporations. And for this reason, companies have made a bigger effort in raising awareness on cybersecurity and relative threats, especially among the employees. And 54% of them has indeed exploited the crisis to foster innovative security systems and strategies in their apparatus. And finally, there has been an increase in investments in operational technology security, and instances of these are hardware, software, to control industrial systems, as well as the implementation of artificial intelligence. And then to conclude.
Yeah, sorry, I will share it again. My computer just gets stuck when. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much, Ludovica. To conclude, what is the future of cybersecurity in Italy and the challenges that Italy would need to face to boost the evolution of the field? Italy should support the development in this field so as to reach other countries and not to stay behind. This will inevitably mean facing challenges. For example, the broadband development and reach is still a big obstacle in Italy, and which will need to be faced in order to promote growth. The country will also need players operating on the national level with significant competences, therefore avoiding the creation of a fragmented sector made of many small businesses individually working in it. And it will also be necessary to ensure the implementation of awareness on cyber risk management among corporations and clients. And alongside with that, the creation of a law of practice to establish standards of action, while also encouraging the increased presence of specialized individuals within businesses that can take care of the cyber domain. And ultimately, these efforts appear to be quite crucial to foster the progress of cybersecurity in Italy. And so I'd like to leave the floor to Mr. Rigoni, and especially to know, according to his experience, what he thinks are the next steps Italy should take to push development in the field even further, and what are the potential future challenges. Thank you very much.
So I suppose we can start, from this last slide, and then I would really love, to make this session, interactive with, questions, comments, and remarks. First of all, I have to say that I have been involved in the development of the Italian strategy for more or less a couple of years. That has been a short period of my career. I started, I think my biography says 25 years ago, but I was thinking, no, it's 32. When 32 years ago, cybersecurity was not even a domain. It was just, networking, connecting networks. Was the advent of the internet, at least, in this part of the world. There was the year of the first law in the world on cybersecurity. There was UK in 1986. That's when maybe we can say cybersecurity, started. So my experience with Italy is a sort of, it's a swing of emotions and also frustrations. First, we're late. We're definitely late. We started many years after other countries. Not only we're late, but many of the things we have done in the past, we did it just because of the pressure of the EU or pressure coming from other international partners, not because the Italian government thought of how strategic was cyber, for the development of the country. Now, I think there is an important element that goes together with cyber. Cyber is mistakenly managed as a domain by itself, by governments. And I say mistakenly because cyber is just the security of a digital domain. So the main attention should be about the digital dimension in terms of, digital development of the country, the impact on the social and economical development of the country, where cyber is just one dimension. It's like thinking about the safety of the aviation, forgetting for a moment about aviation. I mean, it's an intrinsic concept. You don't want to have an airplane or a flight that is not safe and it's not secure. So I think that overall, we have an apparent maturity in terms of awareness, from the government, but in reality, this maturity, as I said, is apparent. So decision makers, they don't really understand why it is important, where it is important, and then how to approach it. And this is a sort of domino effect, and I don't know which is the direction, if it's top down or bottom up, or at the end is the problem of all leaders. It's exactly the same problem of a CEO of a company. And in one of your remarks before, or observations, small companies, they struggle with cybersecurity. It's not only small companies, also large companies, they struggle with cybersecurity. Of course, a small company has different economy of scale that makes their job more difficult. But the problem is the same. Translating the perception of a risk into an action plan. So I cannot say that the majority of the CEOs of large companies in Italy, but I can take companies all over the world. Might be UK. We have reports coming from UK that confirms that we're pre-aligned. Their awareness is pretty high. If you ask them, are you concerned about cybersecurity and the cyber risks? They will all say, yes, of course. They understand that cyber risks might put the reputation of the company, the business of the company, at risk, at serious risk. It's not just, losing a little bit of money. It's blocking the company for hours or for days or for months. And for the majority of the companies, that would mean, getting out of business. But if you ask them, okay, and then what do you need to do? Do you have enough resources? Which are, the challenges you're facing? They're not able to answer. They say, oh, I have, if you're lucky, I have appointed a CISO, and we can open a huge debate where the CISO should sit, which is the role of a CISO, but only the large companies, they have a well-identified person responsible of doing what? Supporting the leadership, not doing cybersecurity. Cyber is a way of running a government. Cybersecurity is a way of running a company. So there is only one responsible, the leadership, the CEO with the board, and the chairman of the board with the chairman of the control and the risk committee. The same is true for a government. Now, where do I want to get? To the role of the agency. So there's a lot of attention about the creation of the agency. Of course, it's an important step, but there is the big risk to confuse the creation of the agency with now we have the solution to cybersecurity. No, it's like thinking I have now found the right office in the government to deal with pandemic, so pandemic is over. No, you simply have an entity that should, I say must, coordinate cybersecurity across the complexity of a state. There is government agencies, number one. Number two, private sector. And number three, citizens. And number four, maybe number four should be between number one and number two, that are the other important, relevant national and international stakeholders. One example, of course, another country or the union or a social platform, so a big tech. I want to come back on big tech and pseudo governments later, and I want to stress which should be the mission of a national agency. So I already introduced the concept of an orchestrator. Usually there is a big confusion, not only in Italy, and again, I cannot talk too much about the Italian model because the agency has been announced, it's going to start on January 1st, and there's not a public plan. So there are just statements coming from the Director General of the agency, but it's just, a high-level declaration on the mission. And we will learn at a later stage, which is going to be the strategy to achieve the high-level objectives. And in principle, I have nothing to disagree, with the objective and the strategic mission of the agency. But the difference is going to be, the difference between succeeding or failing in the way they will interpret the role of the agency. And one mistake that must be avoided is to think of the agency as a sort of law enforcement agency. And I have a clue that makes me a little bit nervous. The announcement about how many people will go into the agency. And, the objective is to reach 800 people. I would have no idea today which should be, the right number of employees of such an agency. And I would not have a way to calculate that. The fact that they have such a clear idea might be a clue that they think of the agency as an operational capability. That might be partially correct because, there are things that you really need to do in practice. You have an emergency like we're having right now, Log4j, this huge vulnerability that is affecting all companies, all platforms, so is really a national and a global emergency. You need people to talk to companies, to analyze the problem, understand the impact, and try to support, the orchestration. But again, for me, priority number one should be orchestrating all the different actors. And in the mandate of the agency is written there, in an ideal world, I would have made the role of the private sector and of the other entities a lot more, evident, much more, clear, because at the end, if you want to protect the national cyberspace, you can't do it by yourself, like you could do it in the military. You have to work hand in hand with the private sector. Michele here, is an expert, is a master in this domain. If I need to protect a power plant from a kinetic threat, another country targeting a rocket against a power plant, the government, through its defense capability, can intervene and protect the power plant. And of course, the military, they have plans to protect multiple, critical infrastructures from many different threats, biological, weapons, terroristic attacks, etc., etc. When we move into the cyberspace, the analogy doesn't work anymore. I cannot employ an army of digital soldiers to protect the digital side of a power plant. It will simply never work. It's going to be impossible. It's not even a question of money and power. That's why I think there is a very nice book written by D. Clark, and I think it's a very authoritative source because of the many years he spent serving the US government, a government that has been among the first to believe in heavy cyber intelligence and cyber offense. They've been among the first governments to create a capability like the National Security Agency with important intelligence and analysis capabilities, and building the Cyber Command. So the equivalent of an army that can perpetrate offensive activities, of course, to protect the United States. D. Clark is one of the strongest voices claiming that those investments are going into the right direction. And I remember one of my friends, Rod Backstrom, in 2010, he was leading at the Department of Homeland Security, the entire cyber department. And he sent a private letter to Janet Napolitano, the secretary of DHS, communicating that his intention to resignate because all the funds were going to the Cyber Command and NSA and not to DHS to better protect the government itself and the critical infrastructures. That letter became public and he had to resign. And then we assisted to a period of big investments in cyber offense. Now, have the United States been able to use their cyber offense capabilities during the pipeline attack? You will recall more or less a year ago, there has been a gas pipeline completely unable to move oil from one side to the other of the country because of cyber attack. They had the cyber weapons to attack the enemy, but they couldn't find the enemy. They couldn't find the antagonist, on the other side. The only thing they had to do was to find a way to recover, from the attack. So in essence, in the nice book, The Fifth Domain, and I strongly encourage you to read that book from D. Clark, is totally aligned to my vision. We have enough evidence to say that first, we need to defend our infrastructures and our assets, because offense might be a deterrent. I might use cyber weapons to say, look, don't attack me because I could counterattack you. But reality is that in most of the important attack cases that we analyzed, there was no enemy. We could reconstruct the threat actors behind after weeks or months, after the attack. And you are, of course, all very, you're able to read between the lines, state-sponsored attacks. In all the statements, it's very, very difficult to finger point and identify one specific actor. We're moving in the cyberspace. We're moving in a cognitive domain. It's completely different from the kinetic space. So for me, the biggest lesson we can learn is let's not repeat the mistakes that other governments have been doing. We're not anymore. There's a lot of good lessons we can learn from kinetic defense, but we're moving now the first steps in a domain that is completely different. And one of my concerns is that we're trying to build on top of existing organizations within governments. And so you get this sort of Frankensteins of agencies that are a little piece connected to that, another piece connected to that, but they are completely, the control is completely fragmented. So what happens is when you have a Log4j, you don't have all the tools to take decisions and to, you know, make an impact, a real impact, you know, to protect the country. Comments, questions before, you know, I move to the next point that I wanted to cover. So I will move on. So first point is working with the private sector. Working with the private sector is not easy. In one of the previous slides, you know, I've seen we need to give them tools to translate the commitment and the awareness into action. Now, this is, in my opinion, the most complex, if not the most, one of the most complex tasks of a national agency. How you change the behavior of a private company without limiting their ability to innovate and to compete in the global market. And in other domains, what you do usually is you come up with a long list of very prescriptive rules. You need to do A, B, and C in order, you know, you protect your business. But when it comes to cybersecurity, it's immediately evident that every potential measure, if applied at its extreme, it might affect the ability to compete in the digital space. You know, of course, there was an old joke that I think started to appear in the internet in 1995 when the word firewall was used for the first time. You know, firewall is still used to indicate a technological device that divides two networks. An insecure network, the internet, and a network that needs to be protected, my home network. And the joke, you know, was a picture of a scissors, a cable, and the cable connected to the computer. There was no Wi-Fi at that time, and that was called the perfect firewall. So just unplug your computer from the internet and you are secure. Now, it was a joke, but it was absolutely correct. There was another joke about Windows NT 3.51 was the first Microsoft operating system for servers that was enabled to connect to the internet. And the joke was about the fact that he got the US government certification, security certification, according to the Orange Books. Now, all security experts knew that that operating system was a complete disaster from a security perspective. And you was arguing how they got certified. Simply, they certified the operating system in a laboratory not connected to the internet. So it was a joke, but was a half a joke. Companies, they need to make trade-offs daily, and they need to learn how to balance connectivity, having my networks and systems, you know, available to my customers with, you know, more protection. That's the role of the government, giving these companies the right awareness, the right tools, and the right support. It's not only giving them regulations. Why didn't we think of including incentives when and security requirements when, for example, we had the industry 4.0 incentives? So we pushed the small and medium enterprises to buy technology to enable robots in the storage system and automated machines and ERPs without thinking about cybersecurity. And it would have been very easy, you know, when you buy a new system to ask, And you know why? You know what? I want the system to be secure. Now that they have a lot of new technology on board, they will struggle to put cybersecurity on top of that. It's like, you design an airplane that is not secure, and then one day you wake up and say, oh, it's not safe. Now we need to change it. Let's put a box in it. No, it doesn't work like that. If an airplane has a problem, with a framework or with the gears, with a landing gear, you need to redesign the aircraft, from scratch. So, that's the issue in cyber. Talking about the private sector, I introduced before a second set of, private companies, the big tech. Big tech is becoming a big issue for cybersecurity, and at the same time, a potential enabler because of the power and the leverages they have in the cyberspace. And is a double-sided sword because the big tech, they don't also play the role of, a pseudo government. It's interesting that when, I can't remember now exactly the year, I think it was 2016, one of the major social networks have been used for coordinating riots and was used by governments to block to block activities and strikes, and the chief security officer of one of these big platforms came up with a statement that was perfect, for a minister, saying, we will do our best to protect the freedom of citizens, and we will work to avoid any interference by foreign governments on citizens' activities, and the freedom, for example, to protest. Wow, said by the chief security officer of a private company. I mean, to me, that has been a wake-up call. Now, these platforms, big techs, it's not only social. We're talking about big platforms in general, but because in different ways, they all have, similar powers. They have now even more power than a government. They have more citizens than the largest governments, and they can change perception of citizens and companies on risks. Try to imagine, do you think that the new generations, so my children, will have the right perception on privacy, to regulate privacy or protection of personal data as the previous generation has done in 1996? Because there was in the previous slides, Italy has been one of the first countries to introduce a strong law on the protection of personal data, so a privacy law. I'm not so sure. I mean, if we look at how the new generations, they perceive privacy, is completely different. Now, is because the laws on privacy are really working, so there's no need to increase protection? I'm not sure. I think the way we perceive risks is changing. I'm not just talking about manipulation, intentional manipulation by a big tech or by a government or a threat actor. I'm talking about, in the most optimistic scenario, about a bias in perception, driven by the big tech. It's not voluntary. It's intrinsic in these big platforms. So some governments started to appoint cyber ambassadors or ambassadors to the big tech. I think it's a great move. Big tech are a threat and an ally at the same time. So something very important, and I hope that the Italian agency will consider, these aspects, they need to be part of the game in a way or in another.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rigoni. I think there have been a couple of questions in the chat related to what you were just pointing out. Maybe Esther asked, you've been through these already, but so the direct question from Esther was what you think about the debates regarding public government's dependence on private companies in cybersecurity. And then a newer question by Frederick, about what you said, working with the private sector. He is asking which private sector. Is Italy looking for a sovereignty first approach at a national level or an alternative approach model, EU leverage through the EDF or the likes, and GAFAM enable solution, etc.?
All very interesting questions. So public-private partnerships, I think we're abusing this definition. It's written in all national strategies. You can't have a national strategy without mentioning the importance of public-private partnerships. I've never seen a public-private partnership really working. The majority of the governments are failing. They don't want to recognize that, but I think the failure, is pretty evident. I don't see a way. I think we should change wording, and we need to talk about now a new form of alliance where the distinction between public and private might become, obsolete. Because here we're talking about common interests. So governments, they need to play, in the future, they need to play a role. A little anecdote, another one, about the role of public-private partnerships. In those 2 years that I spent serving the Italian government, one of the initial real decrease laws that we did on cybersecurity apparently was not about cybersecurity. So I think the day I joined I think I started serving the Prime Minister, technically speaking, on June 3rd, 2013, and on June 5th or 6th, the Snowden case became public. And I remember a chat with my director of national intelligence at that time, who told me, Andrea, we can't think of any law on cybersecurity now. It would be very unpopular. It would be very easy to interpret it, in a negative way. What do we do? So a few days later, I had a meeting with the Prime Minister on this subject, and I told him what I would do is a law on digital identity. It's about the digital citizenship, but it would fix one of the most vulnerable links of the digital value chain. It's not a case that the majority of the big tech is trying to conquer the link between the user, the citizen, and technology. Log in with Facebook, Face ID, having your credit cards in the telephone before your bank. So you are mediated, you are intersected immediately in the digital supply chain. And the Italian law is very different from the other laws on digital identity because the government doesn't deliver any service. The government has only the role of giving the vision, giving the rules, and making sure that the private sector will follow the rules, and they don't abuse, their position when they issue and manage the digital identity of the citizens. I've been heavily criticized when that law has been published because a lot of experts were claiming, no, this is the role the government. Now, is the role of the government building cars for the police? No, I mean, there are companies that are expert in building cars. The government will, provide the guidelines on how to make, of course, how the car should be protected, the color, the lights, but even more important, how to use the cars by the police. So train the drivers and provide, the rules on how to drive, on the roads. In cyberspace, we have no alternative. It has become, the entire cyber domain is managed and owned by the private sector. The cables, the undersea cables, the big switches, all the digital services. If you look even in the military, now the majority of the networks, if not all the networks, are completely managed by private companies. So I think we need to move to a new concept that is not anymore a partnership. We need a convergence of vision and tools and approaches. It might be a new NATO where the allies are governments, big tech, and the entire private sector for protecting society. Right now, we have alliances in the private sector. We have these pseudo governments that are organized, almost like governments. They have law enforcement agencies. If you think a team looking at fake news, what is it if not a law enforcement agency inside a social platform? So they already are building alliances. The problem is that the constitution of these platforms, of this big tech, is not the constitution of our countries. At the end, their main interest is to make their shareholders happy. That's pretty different from the mission and the charter and the constitution of with all the differences between countries, but I would say that the majority of the countries are aligned to these core objectives and core values. So I really wonder if in the future we will not see a new form of alliance, a NATO 2.0, but to protect the cognitive space and not just the physical space.
Thank you. Would someone, maybe Chiara or Sara, do you feel like you want to add something? Or we also have two more follow-up question from Esther and another question from Oleg. But before that, if you feel like you want to add something.
If I may, I just wanted, since we were talking about alliances, I was wondering what the role of the European Union would be, like if the European Union would potentially be could potentially be the promoter of an alliance that could work, and in this, how could Italy potentially we're quite behind, we said, but would it be a chance for Italy to actually, I don't know, play a leader role, or would it be a chance to play a great role in this kind of alliance, or would be just bargaining and trying to keeping up with the other EU powers? Thank you.
So I think this is a great question, because in your question, there's also the answer. Yes, definitely. If there is a government that made, very important advancements in cybersecurity, is the European Union. And I think, their pace is increasing. What I love of the vision of the European Union is that they perfectly understand that cyber is not a domain by itself, but is connected to the development of 5G, on data sovereignty, on data governance, on personal data protection, and the development of artificial intelligence. You know, that's the right way to move. So if there's one government globally that could make, you know, important advancements, in particular when it comes to a constructive dialogue with the big tech, is the European Union. A country like Italy cannot go anywhere by itself. We simply don't have the critical mass to sit down and negotiate with large governments like Facebook and Apple and Amazon, etc., etc.
Great, thank you again. And moving forward, I think it might be useful if anyone that has questions for Mr. Rigoni and our speakers will just keep writing them in the chat. And maybe now I will give this space a little bit to Julia Hodgins, which is part of our cybersecurity team. Yeah, so if you, Julia, want to bring your perspective or some questions to Mr. Rigoni, please.
Thank you very much, Ludovica. It's a big pleasure to be here with all you guys. And Dr. Rigoni, thank you very much for your presentation. I have 3 questions for you, if you allow me. The first one is, Italy is experiencing a rising of ethno-nationalist and right-wing sentiment decades ago after having been an ally of the Third Reich, one of which most powerful tools was the disinformation strategy. Considering the convenience of cyberspace to conduct such actions, as seen in the disinformation campaigns attributed to Russia during the Brexit referendum and the United States presidential elections in 2016, what is the Italian government, or what do you think the Italian government should be considering in order to thwart this type of threat?
So, when there has been the US elections, one of the main concerns was a cyber attack against the ballot machines. So how to manipulate the vote. We have evidence that, yes, there has been a manipulation, but not on the machine, on the voters, on the citizens. You know, through, it's not just fake news, it's much more sophisticated. And I think there are 2 levels. There is one level that is manipulation. So actors might be governments, might be groups within the governments, might be not necessarily, you know, an expression of a single government that intentionally create, craft news to manipulate the perception of the citizens. This is unfortunately a huge problem, amplified, I would say mainly created by the digital platforms, by the way they are built, conceived, and managed. Second, there is an indirect manipulation of information provided by the way the information is propagated and promoted through social. So what you get is not a fake news. You know, there is graphene inside vaccines, but is a little change, you know, in the news or in the information that will slowly lead you in going into a different direction. This is a huge problem. It's not cybersecurity, it's a broader problem, but we have had episodes of manipulating perception in cyber attacks. 2016, I think, was 23rd of December, the attack to the Ukrainian power plant, the Ukrainian distribution and transmission infrastructure. They manipulated the perception of the operation center operator. He thought that there was not a blackout, and he thought it was a system not working, so he switched to the backup system. And that decision, created a one-way procedure that amplified the effect of the attacks. It's just a simple technical example of how manipulating perception might have a devastating effect also in the cyber domain. Is Italy doing something on that? Short answer is no. Is there enough attention on the topic? Yes. There's a lot of political debates. There's no easy solution because some of the tools we have might limit freedom of speech. And right now, we see a polarization in all the debates. If I try to intervene, we believe that information on social media is flowing freely. And if we intervene to protect the citizens who are introducing a bias, reality is that the information is already manipulated, either intentionally or just by the way the system is built. So yes, it's a serious problem.
Thank you very much. My second question is, the United States government is currently pursuing a cyber strategy oriented in making the cyberspace safer and secure for everybody, while the United Kingdom declares to take an offensive measure cyber strategy looking at protecting their interests. Being these two countries Western key actors, what implications would their strategies have for Italy foreign policy and cyber strategy in your perspective?
So first of all, let me say that US and UK strategy are very aligned in reality. Statements might look different, but the reality is that they've been both investing in cyber defense, cyber reconnaissance, so threat intelligence, and cyber offense for defensive purposes. Italy is not totally aligned because the use of offensive capabilities is there's a lot of sensitivity about the use of offensive capabilities, and going back to my point, I hope that Italy will learn from the mistakes of the others, and instead of investing heavily in cyber offense capabilities, they will invest in not even resilience. That is what Dick Clark is proposing as the solution. I agree, he's right, but for me, resilience is a concept for engineers, is the way you design something. I much prefer to use the word readiness, and the pandemic, I think, is a great example. So it's something that is based on preparation and testing, is completely dynamic. There's a lot of human factor involved because it's based on decisions that we take at all levels, every day. So in my opinion, we should heavily invest in cyber readiness. That's my answer.
Thank you very much. And my last question, well, actually, I have another one, but let's go with this first. The evolution of cyber attacks in diverse targets worldwide suggests that the cyber resilience that you just mentioned seems to be a key component at every level, more so as increasing innovations enhance risks factors, such as the Internet of Things in any network. In 1996, laws on cyber resilience were passed in Italy that likely the pace of technology advancement has left outdated. Presently, what plans do you think Italy have or should have for seeing cyber resilience of government, private, and household networks on the face of potential attacks on critical national infrastructure?
So there's multiple questions in one question. First of all, I think the concept of critical infrastructures has become older. We're now talking about protecting the digital ecosystem, and the digital ecosystem is an enabler for many critical services: electricity, transportation, voting system. You mentioned the concept of resilience, and I totally agree that that should be, the number one priority. So enhancing the resilience of all the national critical services. And the third element that you introduce is Internet of Things, emerging technologies. So when we think about Italy and the agency, we think about borders, the Italian border, national law, national borders, companies in Italy. But the digital space is global. It's full of borders and is borderless at the same time. So the technology we use, and I was reading sovereignty, data, digital sovereignty, between the questions. That's a big issue, of course. But we're using global technologies. I mean, today, we would not have our life if we decide, I don't want to have any more Chinese technology in my life, in my country, in my infrastructures. Forget, we switch off the lights immediately. We switch off every train. We switch off every metro in the cities. We switch off traffic lights. We block the entire country. Can we afford to produce in Italy all the technology that, of course, is sensitive from a security perspective? No way, unless we go back 50 years or we become completely not competitive. So all this discussion about technological sovereignty is, and I'm not against that, but I'm saying that we need to be careful just to state, we need to think about data or technological sovereignty. Of course, right now, not having one single manufacturing plant for chips, is a problem for important industries in Europe. Car manufacturing, just to mention one that is heavily affected. Data sovereignty. Should we push in the future to physically locate data in your own country to have more control and more protection? It's an old concept. It's the concept where you have data in a hard drive and you can send the police and with a subpoena and get the data. And if you think if that data is in another country, you can't do that. Now, in a fully interconnected digital space, that's an old concept. We can work, I can have data in South Africa and have this data, fully protected. I can have data in my country, fully exposed. Some of the big techs are working on the concept of virtual data sovereignty. So a concept where you don't care where the data is physically located, but you as a government, if you need to have access for national security reasons, think of the San Bernardino's debate, FBI wanted to have access to the famous iPhone with the evidence of, the terrorist attack at San Bernardino, could do that independently. FBI, they had the phone, they had physical access. So I think that in the digital space, the old concept of boundaries, physical locations are completely outdated. Of course, there is a new concept of sovereignty that, because otherwise we would see the sovereignty of governments, disappearing in the digital and cognitive space. That's the biggest risk. We need a new class of politicians and decision makers that are able to have these kind of conversations, because the big challenges now are moving from physical to cognitive space.
Thank you very much. Very comprehensive and enlightening answers, Mr. Rigoni. And actually, I agree with you when you were saying earlier about the concept of convergence, not without acknowledging that it's going to pose a lot of regulatory and strategic challenges, because it's traditionally seen that the private sector is one sector and the government regulates the private sector. But at the same time, the private sector serves the government. So yes, we are having some sort of buffer or gray zone. And if we add to that the layer of this international privatization of security, well, we have it even more challenging. And the militarization of security as well. So yes, we are living unprecedented, challenging and interesting times for cyber. And at the same time, cyber is an artifact, a social artifact. We all participate and take action and live through that, especially now in the pandemic. The COVID has shown us that we are more cyber personas than kinetic personas. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. That were very great questions. And we also have great questions from our chat, from our participants. So I will just like to read them out loud. So Oleg is pointing out, he's asking if there are any specifically Italian problems or maybe advantages as far as cybersecurity is concerned. Is Italy special in any way compared to other European countries, for example, or is it vanilla? If it is special, how so?
So I don't think Italy is different from the average European country. But I would say, man, I'm spending a lot of time also outside Europe, helping governments from Botswana to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, to extremes. And I would say that the challenges are, exactly the same. I think that very easily, Italy, Saudi Arabia, and Botswana could better protect the interests, the values of the citizens with a common strategy. I think that there might be, differences in the way, the law is applied, but when it comes to the principles, for protecting citizens and companies and national interests. And I'm saying that because I'm very close to the political cyber agenda of, and I'm mentioning these countries because I'm working with these countries. I might mention Rwanda, that maybe is even a better, a better example than Botswana, Burundi. We're all assisting we're assisting all these countries. We have much more in common than differences, including data protection, because I was seeing one of the questions about GDPR. Look at the Chinese law on protecting personal data. I am quite sure that if we will adopt the Chinese data protection law in Europe, it would not be against the principles of the European Union, and we would have even a better way of protecting personal data. Is there any particular peculiarity in Italy? No, I think the culture is not very different from UK. I'm working with many board of directors in UK. I want to say that I found board of directors more prepared on cybersecurity in Italy than in the UK. I was very skeptical at the beginning, but now after many years of working across multiple countries, in Italy we have one advantage now. Let's talk about the differences. We have a lot of small and medium enterprises and very few large corporations. So the recipe should be slightly different. Pushing models of secure cloud, secure managed services, so consolidating. The small companies cannot manage cybersecurity the old way. The second big difference in Italy is the recovery fund. That's tons of money And I think Italy has a unique opportunity. Now, there are 612 million for cybersecurity. Target is the agency. Agency will use those money to hire people, build platforms, make investments. But we have 40 billion euros for implementing and deploying digital infrastructures. Now, if it's true that on average, you spend between 10 to 20% of a digital project for its assurance, it means that we have between 2 to 4 billion euros for cybersecurity in Italy. That's a massive amount of money to invest on cybersecurity, which is the challenge, that it's not cybersecurity, it's digital. So we don't have to repeat the mistake of giving incentives to the companies to invest on digital without telling them, if you do an unsecured digital, I will not fund you. So I give you the money only if you make it secure by design. So that's the challenge I think we will have in Italy. Now, when I referred before to the Frankenstein that usually governments they do when they deal with cybersecurity, the agency, the National Cybersecurity Agency, is supporting the Ministry of Technological Development and Digital, but they just support. So the famous 21 plus 20 billions on the digital transformation, there's not a direct control of the cybersecurity elements, from the agency. They sit at the table, and this is not just an Italian problem. This is a problem happening everywhere.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And what you were talking about, the GDPR, so this was mentioned by Oleg. Thank you, Oleg, when referring to a question by Pinar. Pinar brought the example of Turkey and how like the government have appointed social media representatives to the big social media networks, and the legislation requires social media companies to store users' data inside the country and answer requests concerning privacy rights. And it was perceived very critically given the government's approach to human rights and the freedom of speech. And so, yeah, he was asking, do you think a similar approach should be also implemented in the European Union or in Italy specific?
So I think this is another great question, but I want to answer from a slightly broader perspective. I think there is always a tension when we talk about security and privacy and human rights. And the famous debate, so I was in Georgetown talking in a panel with James Comey, the head of the FBI, when he was very strongly, stating that we need to have access to the iPhone. It's about national security. I understand that we want to protect the privacy of the citizens, but in this case, we're putting at risk the security of the citizens and the security of a country. Now, the majority of the debates have been around the inclusion of backdoors. If you want to open the iPhone, as James Comey, was asking about, the technology community was saying, oh, you need to introduce a backdoor, but the backdoor might be used not only by the US government, but it might be used by the bad actors. I joined other debates. I can't remember. I think it was Zimmerman, one of the inventors of the one of the most famous encryption algorithms, is a strong sponsor of encryption. I was at the United Nations conference in Geneva like 2,000 people in front of us. I was the moderator, and he was saying that this is crazy. Governments cannot interfere with encryption. Putting backdoors would be crazy because it would weaken the protection of citizens. Now, I think there is a fundamental mistake when I hear these extreme positions. I think it's always a balance of human rights, even in the European fundamental rights in the Charter, we talk about the rights of protecting our privacy, but there's also a right to be protected, to protect our jobs, to protect our families, and is a continuous balance. And I think that's the role. First, the experts should avoid to play the political game, take extreme positions, and they should support the government explaining what is possible, what is not possible. And it's the role of the governments to guide research and technological development. So governments should say, for example, dear technological community, I want you to develop a technology that is completely secure. I don't want to have backdoors, but I want a transparent mechanism that can allow a government to have access to data under certain conditions. And these conditions not only have to be transparent, but the use of those conditions needs to be completely traced, and the government should be accountable when they use that mechanism. Think, about the encryption. You don't want a government to sniff into a user communication just because they claim, oh, there's a national security threat. If there is a serious cybersecurity or a national security threat, there's a committee. You notify the committee. I want to use the special keys. The world will know. The citizens will know that you're going to use that key on that phone for that purpose that has been defined by the law. Can the technological community develop such an algorithm that can guarantee both things? Yes, of course. We already have examples of cryptographic systems can allow very complex governance mechanisms. So I believe that privacy can be obtained without necessarily affecting national security, and vice versa. I don't think that increasing cybersecurity means lowering human rights, freedom of speech, personal data privacy. Of course, it requires different experts, different policymakers to sit around the same table and have a dialogue and do not think in silos. Unfortunately, if we look at what's happening in many countries, this is managed just through tension. In particular, in the public opinion, media, they love to give an extreme interpretation of all these positions.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you for the answer.
Yeah, thank you for making your point very clear on this very interesting, controversial topic. But yeah, thank you for your answer. And we have a couple more questions from our participants. So Frederick is asking, considering your points on data location, what is your perspective on the US Cloud Act lawfare?
So I'm not very familiar with the content of the US Cloud Act. So if you can further elaborate which point in the US Cloud Act you are referring to, I'm a little bit more familiar, with the European one.
Yeah, in the
Can we
meantime,
wait for Frederick just to provide more?
Yeah, we'll give you, Frederick, maybe more time. In the meantime, Martina, last question is from Martina, and she kind of sums up, taking from what you told us in the beginning, and she's asking, all things considered, what are your recommendations to the Italian government and security agencies in terms of public-private sectors cooperation?
So in practical terms, the agency needs to establish a permanent connection with the private sector stakeholders, not just the stakeholders in the national security perimeter. We have two laws in Italy. One is the adoption of the NIS directive, and then the national security perimeter. They're very similar with some little differences. We're talking about companies that have been identified as relevant from a national security perspective. You know, of course, first step for the agency is to establish a permanent channel with all of them, with very clear protocols on, you know, how to exchange information, but also how to react to national situations. One of the problems, and this is not based on decisions taken by the agency, because the agency will start in January, but by other agencies. There is always the tendency, when they get closer to the private companies, to ask private companies to get the agency, to give the agency more data. Why? Because this will help the agency to get more situational awareness. Of course, if you are in military intelligence, the first thing you want to have are maps and pictures from satellites and data coming from deployed agents, tanks, radars, whatever. In cyberspace, again, I go back to one of the remarks I made before. We should avoid confusing the kinetic, what we do in the kinetic space through digital technologies, and to translate that into the cognitive domain. Collecting massive amount of data from private companies, it's not only risky, it's not only a problem for personal data protection, it's not only risky for the reputation of the agency. What happens if there's a data leakage? I mean, the reputation of the government and the companies that are giving those data to the government is, of course, at risk. It's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to cost tons of money. Where are you going to put those data? Then you need to think, either I invest in huge data centers or I rely on cloud, another issue to manage. Plus, many of the participants have military or intelligence, background. There is the intelligence pyramid, data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. At the end, an agency, a central agency, what they want to have is what in the military they call the shared situational awareness. It's not data. I don't want to move the theater to the control room. No, I just need the high-level picture. That's the wisdom, and I need that in order to be able to take the right decisions. In the cyberspace, you don't achieve the right level of shared situational awareness just collecting data. Why? Because data is completely missing the context. So when we talk about the kinetic world, everything is analogic. Even if it's digitalized, it's a picture. A digital picture is a digital representation of an analog concept. I mean, if I take a picture of a tank, there's a color. I can interpret the color. I can interpret the logo, and I compare it to my kinetic experience. I can look at the dimension. I can look at what's around the tank. When I take a series of bits and bytes from the context, and I bring them to you without telling you the context, you have no idea of what we're talking about. You want an example? I give you a digital asset. 13. What is that? That's a digital number. So 13 might be a temperature, might be the age of a person, might be the level of the amount of money you have, in your bank account. But 13 by itself means nothing. A stream of bits might be an MP3 music, it might be a picture, it might be a page of a book. Without the context, the digital information cannot be interpreted. Now, I'm oversimplifying, but believe me, technically speaking, the concept is correct. When you extrapolate data from a private sector company, you move it to a central agency, that data becomes almost useless. What is much better for an agency to do is, first, to make sure that the company is collecting data, but second, they are interpreting reality the same way. How, as we do, for example, in the traditional world, through dictionaries, through taxonomies, through guidelines. If we are in the aviation security, if I tell you that an airplane is flying at 90 kilometers per hour, you immediately know we have a big issue. That airplane, because for the standards and the guidelines, that plane might be crashing because it's reaching the stall speed. So what governments they need to do in cyberspace is define taxonomies, how to describe the complexity of a context in a way that can be communicated without disclosing the raw data. There's no better sector than the sector of the big techs in doing that. The big techs are not worried at all about personal data. They're only worried about companies abusing the access to the platforms, but not themselves violating personal data, because they move to metadata and they move to cognitive analysis. So completely forgetting about the raw data. So we should learn from them. So getting closer to the private companies, defining ways of not moving data, but moving knowledge. So defining dictionaries, defining taxonomies, defining protocols, not in isolation. Europe hasn't been defining a dictionary. So the NIS directive, which is the main point of the European directive, is about the disclosure of cyber incidents. That is positive because it will force companies to declare that if they had a data breach, they had an attack, their infrastructure has been frozen because of a ransomware. But other than that, what is going to do the European Commission through the EU Hub with the information on a cyber incident? Try to imagine when they will be flooded by hundreds of thousands of incidents. If you don't have a European or a global taxonomy on the incidents, how to describe the impact of an incident, how to discriminate if an incident is serious or not, if that incident can affect assets that are used by other infrastructures, that information in the hands of national or regional governments will be useless. And right now, it's hard to believe, but there's no one single government or entity like NATO that ever defined a taxonomy for threat actors. We use the taxonomy that is provided by a private company, CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike has become, and I'm not accusing the friends that created it are doing an amazing work in CrowdStrike, but why we are using CrowdStrike? Not because CrowdStrike imposed to use their definitions, but because the governments have been doing nothing about defining a dictionary to describe threats. Why we need a dictionary? To call the same way and to recognize what might be a potential threat. If I say plutonium, you're all understanding. If we talk about an IOC, so the technical way of describing a potential threat, most of us would react in very, very different ways. So very difficult role for a central agency, very difficult role.
Yeah, thank you. This is being very enriching. I think I'm talking on behalf of everyone. It was such an honor to hear your answer and your very comprehensive answer, and of course your insights. This is being very enriching. I would like to give Frederick the, Frederick did add something. He says, let's say that it facilitates the access to any data, whoever put it there, stored in the US or by US companies, to the US government and its agencies, judiciary or intel.
Yeah, let's consider that in a way or in another, this is true in every country. I mean, under an investigation, a government can have access to any data. I mean, if you have a subpoena, even the Italian government, during an investigation, even a preliminary investigation, they can have, full access. So written like that, I don't see as something, completely new. The real question is what happens if that data is encrypted? Because the big debate, and I don't know if there's any mention in the US Act, if you store data in the US, you need to provide the US government the keys to encrypt data if they request to have access. And if you don't do that, that's criminal law. So that might be the case, because right now I would not be concerned in putting data in the US if I encrypt it as well as US data stored in other countries. Is the way you manage access to data, so it's encryption keys.
The UK has such a law, the Investigative Power Act. So there, basically, if they ask you for your key password and you refuse to give it, you go to jail.
There's a famous case a few years ago of someone who refused and went to jail because they refused to provide the encryption keys.
If I may interject briefly, in Canada, for example, we are very careful at the point to say that many times the government, regional governments or federal governments, we do not contract nothing with that has the server's residence in the United States, because they have what is called the Patriot Act, that they can call the information, and our information, our private information, is going to be available to the CIA, and that data leaks happen all the time. So the federal government, the provincial government again, and the regional governments of any size are very wary to either not do it, or now they're incorporating a clause called service residency. That if the company, let's say, is ITSS or Amazon or whatever, the residence of the server, the physical server where things are stored, are not within USA territory. Thank you.
I think that both the Patriot Act and what I understand is, the Cloud and the Data Act, this might give other regions like, the European Union an interesting opportunity. Now, numbers about the development of AI, 60% of the business of AI is in the United States. Now, there are these claims that, China is the big threat. China is 9% compared to the United States, and Europe together is like 7%. Now, I was at a conference in Venice a few weeks ago, and one of the experts there was arguing if all the laws that we have in Europe on data protection might be an explanation of this big difference. I mean, in the United States, an AI, it grows, it can be developed if you have access to data. And I can guarantee you that in Europe, if you are a bank and you want to start using AI on the data you own, collected from your customers, you cannot do that. You need to go back to customers, submit a new agreement, and they have to accept. And the majority of the banks, they don't do it. So when I go back, there is a very dangerous way of thinking about, data protection. But on the other side, we also need to be careful that if we provide too much protection, we might inhibit the development of technologies like AI. Can we leave boycotting the AI developed by the United States? Question mark. Can AI improve our, quality of life? For example, finding in a matter of days the vaccine to cure a new pandemic. So we go back against we cannot take absolute decisions. They always need to be measured against many other domains. That is, safety and security and freedom. And I think it's becoming almost an alchemy where, you need to play with all these ingredients together. And, if you try to move the sliders to one extreme, you might get negative effects unacceptable in another domain. But by the way, I mean, Apple is using the Patriot Act as, and the San Bernardino. That's incredibly interesting. I mean, the example I gave of the European Union, Apple is the perfect example. After they used the San Bernardino case, I can't remember if that was 2015, I think. Yes, it was 2015. The San Bernardino case to become the company that is taking care of the protection of its customers. So it's the privacy company. And you see, even on the TV spots, their advertisement, they're leveraging the protection of personal data. They will never, ever share data. Then we know that they have some little problems with accessing iCloud, private pictures became public, government that accessed private pictures of Mr. Bezos and he divorced through that. So we don't live in a perfect world, luckily. But yes, a different balance in Europe might put Europe in a very interesting position, to develop. The real question is, do we need to remove any protection of personal data to enable AI? And I go back to the encryption discussion we had before. I don't think so. The Italian law that I designed in 2013 on digital identity included the concept of attribute providers. Now, I might say, I designed it intentionally to allow a protected exchange of data to enable AI, because today that might allow exactly that. But I admit, I was not so visionary in 2013, or I was partially visionary. The idea was, if I have to allow, sharing data that is not personal but is connected to person, so PII, personal identifiable data, but in a secure way, I can do that, and we introduce the concept of attribute providers. That unfortunately the Italian government, after I left, did not recognize, so it's there completely unused. That's a shame, but maybe in the future. So I believe that not Italy, but Europe can find a balanced way to protect personal data, but at the same time have a human-centric development of technologies. That I think is our challenge. There's a beautiful book. I strongly recommend you read this book. It's here. Do you see the book? Alec Ross, he has been advisor to Barack Obama. He was the technology and innovation advisor of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. He now lives in Bologna. He's a professor at the Bologna Business School. He wrote the Raging 2020s, I furiosi anni 20. And in the Italian edition, he put a very nice introduction that you don't find in the English book, where he says that Italy has the unique opportunity, because of course he says, United States has done an amazing work in supporting the development of new technologies, but this technology is not human-centric, is doing the opposite, is technology-centric, and is shaping humans. When I was referring before to the manipulation of perception, not intentional, but is embedded in technology. Winston Churchill said, man builds buildings, and buildings, they shape society, they shape people. The same is true, for technology. So I see a manifesto there in the Alec Ross introduction that is Italy, and I like to think Europe might play a role in the development of a human-centric technology.
Thank you. Really, thank you on behalf of everyone's behalf. This is very enriching. But time is flying. I bet some of our participants maybe need to leave, but I saw maybe some hands were raised. Maybe Chiara and Sarah, do you want to add something and to this amazing opportunity to be able to speak with you, Mr. Rigoni? Really enriching and insightful. Do you?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much. And I really appreciated your insight on the balance between recognizing cybersecurity as a unique sphere, but also being able to integrate that into the larger security challenges that a country like Italy faces in the kinetic sphere.
Yeah, thank you so much, and also for your experience and examples, concrete examples that you provided. I think it kind of helped to better understand what are the general knowledge that is provided to people that are not really working and studying in the field, but this helps so much to better understand the whole situation and also the challenges of the field and how Italy can improve also on the European level. It was really, really interesting. Thank you.
And if you have any additional question after the session, or you want to get in touch with me through Michele and the ITSS, you can reach me. I'm doing a lot of work both with the Italian government and the European institutions, as I also lead our Digital Policy Center. So we have the opportunity to analyze what EU is doing, but also to contribute to some of their packages. So if you're interested for research purposes, because you want to contribute, or you're just curious, I'm very happy, to connect.
If I may jump in very, very, very quickly, let me just restate on behalf of ITSS Verona, Andrea, thank you so much. Team, you should know, Andrea is very humble, but he's let's just say that in Italy, probably the expert and probably even a world-leading expert in what he does. Therefore, Andrea, you really honor us. Also, let us remember that with Oleg, they are part of our scientific committee, and so this is a real reason for us to be incredibly happy, honored. I mean, really for all of this. But also thank you to, Frederick, who also, works with all of this, and to everyone who could, make this tonight. Ludovica, huge thanks for chairing, for running the event. Huge thanks also to Sarah, Julia, and Chiara for your questions and or like for setting the scene, so that Andrea could enlighten us and enrich the discussion. Andrea, I also had a number of questions, but this is per la prossima puntata, next time.
Of course, and you're too nice. You spent too nice words about me. I'm simply, passionate, and the only difference is that I started 32 years ago, so I have a lot of interesting stories from different places. But let's keep some of the other questions for a part 2. I would be very honored, to be with you again. I would love.
Great. Sounds like a deal.
Deal done. Thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much all. Grazie, Ludovica, everyone, Andrea, Oleg, Frederick, all our guests, also from Kenya, Osborne, very good to see you, and all the other parts of the world, including the Defense Academy of the United Kingdom and King's College London, which we are based along, obviously, with Verona. So, have a great night, everyone, or rest of the day. Julia, who's in Canada. Happy holidays, and we're definitely going to see you soon. Ciao.
Goodbye.
Ciao. Thank you. Bye. Good morning.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, everyone.